I'm Karen Gimnig, as she said, and the biggest thing is I'm passionate about connection. At the end of the day, I think the reason we do all these things that we do and the reason we use Sociocracy is because we are really designed as human beings to be connected. And I see connection as necessary to human life in the same way that air and water are. I do not think we thrive without it. And that's really the space that I come into, is in any group, in any relationship, whether it's between 2 people or 100 people, if individuals aren't experiencing a sense of connection, that's not going to be an effective space. So I get pretty excited about that. I am a consultant and a relationship coach. I work primarily with co-housing communities and also other groups, nonprofits, professional teams that are in any place where collaboration is trying to happen. I'm an Imago professional facilitator. Imago Relationships is an organization and a theory and an approach to relationship work. Has a lot in common with what Nara and Tanya were talking about in the last session around listening and mirroring. That's very much part of the Imago playbook as well, and takes it deeper in a couple of ways that I will talk about a little bit today. And I'm also the communications director for Coho US. So that's the United States Association for Co-Housing. And we'll be putting on a conference very much like this one, focused on the heart of community, the relational side of community, on Saturday. So that's kind of what I've been doing this week, is getting ready for that conference coming up. And I'm also a licensed Agile fluency facilitator. So Agile is a software development model that relies on collaboration, and getting the relational space working better there is something I'm pretty excited about too. So that's a bit about me. I'm going to pause for just a second and take a look at, so I see co-housing, I see political activism, interest in how to avoid passive aggressive behavior. Good, we'll get there. Yep. Permaculture, more co-housing, church. Wonderful. Yeah. There are a number of sort of collaborative models for religious groups that have a lot in common with Sociocracy. Yeah. Great. This is exciting. NGO company trainings, dance communities. I'd love to hear more about that at some point. Food co-op, Extinction Rebellion, fabulous. Okay. So I think we'll cover kind of all those areas, and we will have time for questions. So I want to start with a little definition. When I say high emotions, what does that look like? How do we know that we have them? And I really did a summary. I think they show up broadly in 2 ways. The way that I call the big way, and I got alliterative here, loud, loquacious, or lording over. So people get loud being literally the yelling, screaming, what we think of as very aggressive behavior. Loquacious can just be they keep talking. This can be that's often a sign that somebody is really passionate or really has strong emotions about it. Or the lording over, where I just pretend I am the expert of everything and my way is the only way and I know more about it than anybody else. I think of all of those as sort of big expressions of high emotions. Mostly, I think my guess is that when people came, that mostly we were thinking of the aggressive, that loud behavior. But I want to name the others. Those are all people getting bigger because they have high emotions. And then there are people who get smaller when they have high emotions. And these, I said withdrawn, withholding, and worried. So people who pull back, and that can be even just physically. You can see them sit further back in their chair or even shift their chair further back from a circle. On Zoom, I think sometimes it's really hard to know this, which is one of the challenges of Zoom, but I think sometimes when people turn off their video, for example, that can be a withdrawing kind of behavior. It also can be lots of other things. So I want to be cautious of making that assumption, but it could be a withdrawing behavior. Withholding, where I have thoughts and I have things I could say and I'm deliberately not saying them. That can be a response to, I have really high emotions and I'm going to hold that in. I'm going to turtle up with that. And then I use the word worried. People who look agitated, stressed. You may see fidgety type behavior, or just the sort of furrowed brow, or that sort of look of concern or distress. All of that can happen without any voice to it. The small stuff is often what gets overlooked. And I want to really point out a couple of things. One is, high emotions are incredibly valuable. Most of us would rather that expressions of high emotions didn't happen because they're uncomfortable, because they feel dangerous. We label them often as aggression, which we think of as a bad thing. And I want to really point to powerful things happen when there are powerful emotions in the room. Sometimes the high emotion is the thing that draws us to the thing that we didn't know was happening. Sometimes it reveals an unspoken truth that we really needed. And sometimes it just means that person is showing up in a way that they haven't yet, and it's an opportunity for connection and bonding and safety to be produced. And I won't say that they're easy. I won't say I would wish for them to happen every single meeting, but I do want to really be careful of the stories we tell ourselves about high emotions, because I think they are incredibly valuable. And then the other piece is that it's really important to notice both the big high emotions and the small high emotions. I see groups that get a culture of, they only notice the big ones. So the people who tend to present their high emotions in what I'm calling a smaller way, in that more withdrawn kind of space, tend to feel run over and overlooked and not heard because nobody attends to them. And then the people who do it in a big way get labeled as aggressive and tend to get blamed and a lot of judgment thrown at them. And none of that is going to be useful to the group. High emotions are high emotions. They're part of humanity. And how the group engages is going to be pretty significant. I do think that as we do our personal work and do our journey and get better at, being able to show up when we need to show up, we're less likely to express our high emotions in a way that others experience as unsafe and dangerous. And reality is, in a group, this is going to show up from time to time. And if we can handle it well, it can really serve the group. And if we handle it badly, it can be trouble for the group. So any questions about just that piece? I'll stop share for just a second, see everybody. Questions about that, just definitional piece? Okay. And we shall go back to the slides. So planning ahead, you can add safety, and the big picture stuff, as we said, was really covered a lot in the last session. I'm talking here about when we're about to have a meeting about something that people feel really strongly about. There are high emotions about this topic. I know it's coming. There are some things you can do in how you structure the meeting and how you approach it that will likely make it go better. I'm gonna say you don't always know that it's coming. High emotions show up out of nowhere, and we'll talk about that. But I just want to give us a little bit of a primer of, if you know you're going into a high emotions meeting, I'm going to say I wouldn't facilitate it exactly the same way that I would facilitate a meeting that I expected to be routine. I would use some sort of centering activity. I recommend this for a lot of meetings. I think it's a good practice. It may not be a practice in your group, but if you know people are going to come in already ready for a fight, already agitated, already defensive about stuff, I'm going to trust that if we can get them a little more centered in themselves before we start, that's going to help. So this can be meditation. It can be the reading of a poem. It can be some kind of Tai Chi, or, there are lots and lots of methods, that things that sort of get people quiet, get people present, get people focused on what we're here for and really present in the room with the group. Pick your favorite one, call, if there's a member of the group who has a specialty of that, in that realm, ask them to do it. There's lots of ways, but start the meeting getting people fully present is going to help. Take time for a little deeper check-in. Just expect to spend more time at check-in, figure out where people are. You want to build the sense of connection and safety in the room as much as you can. And so taking a little more time to get everybody present at check-in is worthwhile. Pair mirroring is an option that I use a lot, or otherwise some sort of discussion for a group. When I say pair mirroring, I mean literally pair people off, give them a couple of prompts, generally related to the topic at hand, and have them share and mirror each other. And that mirror each other part is really important. That you want, so somebody's going to share the prompt that was given, and their partner is going to say, what I heard you say is, and I'm going to add 2 extra little elements of that mirror, which are, so what I heard you say is, did I get you? And if not, that's where that gets sorted out. And then one of the really profound deepening spaces is there more? And often that more space is the thing they needed to say that they maybe didn't know that they needed to say, or it wasn't really conscious, but it was somewhere in their unconscious and it needed to come up. That is there more is huge. If you pair people off and have them do that kind of exercise around the topic ahead, and I've done this sometimes, I've taken as much of an hour of a meeting, pair people off with a series of prompts. I've also done it where it's 5 minutes. So you can, there's a whole range depending on what you need to do. But it activates listening centers in the brain. So you're actually a better listener when you come back to the meeting, and it dramatically increases safety. So have people pair, do the mirror exercise. You can do it with some other kind of smaller group discussion. Great thing about pair mirroring is it works really well on Zoom because you can just put everybody in breakout rooms and do that. So setting the stage with some of that is going to, again, increase the safety, increase the trust, and decrease the reactivity or the tendency for high emotions to take over. It's going to keep people more connected between their emotions and their cognitive, which is what we're hoping for. We don't want the emotions to go away, but we want them to engage with the cognitive so that you've got all of the brain at once. And pair mirroring does that better than anything else that I know of. So you can do that. Another option when you're planning your meeting is to shorten or decrease the agenda. If you know you've got one really hot topic that's going to have a lot of emotion around it, if you also have 5 other topics and that crowds the high emotion topic, you're liable to get into trouble. So just be very thoughtful about how much you're putting on an agenda and leave yourself with the space to do a high emotions topic in a way that honors the emotions. So that's a piece. Another piece for adding safety is to tighten or increase the structure. So if you've got a group that does a lot of popcorn, or, you know, because there's a lot of comfort, you do a lot of casual conversation, you want to not do that this meeting. I would go back to really firm rounds, to that high structure gives you some safety. You might need to do timed rounds, particularly if you know you've got a group that has some people who talk and talk and talk. That's that loquacious high emotions thing showing up. A timed round is going to equal that. And if you know going into it that you might need it, then you're not doing it responsive to one person where they can feel attacked. You're just saying, you know, for this topic, I think it's going to be important that we all have equal time to speak. So I'm going to run a timer today. And everybody's going to get 1 minute or 2 minutes or whatever that is. And as I said, this probably isn't the time to use popcorn because, again, those power dynamics are going to show up and you're going to be better off to use a really structured round. Any questions about the planning ahead strategies if you know it's coming? Okay, we'll keep going. Oh, and narrow prompts. I missed one of my points. So yeah, just to make your prompts 4 rounds or what we're talking about more narrow will keep people focused when emotions will tend to pull them off topic. So I want to pause here to say dealing with high emotions is probably not anybody's favorite thing. So do your own work. As a facilitator, I can't give you, here's the script you can say and it's all going to be fine. Dealing with high emotions is emotional, energetic work, and you yourself, in how you yourself hold your person is going to impact how you're able to hold space for the rest of the group. Check for your own bias, triggers, and reactivity. Even just knowing your own, and I think in the last session they were talking about having a partner, a relational space partner. That would be a great person to have this conversation with ahead of the meeting if you know that there's something coming up. If something shows up you weren't expecting, give yourself a minute to check again, like, where am I in this? Notice and own and honor your own emotional response. If you're furious, if somebody is really triggering you, if their high emotion display has you really reactive and you go, oh, I'm just going to shove that down and stuff it, they're all going to see it. We humans are incredibly good at reading the danger signs in each other's emotional space. So if you're telling yourself you can hide it, I'm going to encourage you not to. If you need to take a moment to breathe, to get a hold of yourself, if you're feeling really triggered and reactive, I would say it. I mean, I would just name it, not blame anybody and not take sides. But, wow, I'm having a really strong emotional response to this. I need to take a minute is way better than to sort of stuff it and move on. Notice the story you're telling yourself about it. Again, and I mentioned sort of this at the beginning, we tend to tell ourselves the story that this is aggression, it's a bad thing, it's going to hurt the group. We would just want it to stop. Consider a story more like, this is a good thing. We're about to discover a better way than we have thought of yet. Like really getting clear about the potential that exists when high emotions show up. And the more that you can be thinking of it in that way, the more likely I think you are to engage with it productively. And if needed, consider asking someone else to facilitate. There will be moments of high emotion that are not yours to handle. If you are having strong feelings on one side of an issue, especially if that's known to the group, but as I've said, you probably can't hide it. It may just not be your moment to facilitate, and you may need somebody else. If you get sort of a lot of it repeatedly, you may need to ask an outsider to come in, whether that's a paid consultant or a partner organization or just somebody else that you know that you sort of trade this with. There are lots of ways to do that. But I think sometimes what happens is people kind of know, like as a facilitator, I know I'm too biased about this. I know I don't have the right trust. I know I'm not the ideal person, but I'm the only one who can. And I want to really push back on that and say, I don't think you're ever the only one who can. And I'm the only one who can is a horrible reason for facilitating. That really be open to, I'm not the one, it's not going to work well if I do this. And the health of the group is going to be way better if you can say that and be honest about it and maintain the sort of trust and relationships in the group than if you push ahead because there doesn't seem to be anybody else. So be ready to ask somebody else. So when it happens in a meeting, breathe. If you breathe, everybody else will. And particularly pay attention to the exhale. Like, don't just breathe in, also breathe out. Breath holding is associated with all sorts of heightened emotions. So you don't want to breathe in and hold it. You want to breathe in and breathe out. Be fully present. Whatever you need to do within yourself to really get there and be fully present, you want to slow things down. And that's whether somebody is big and it's feeling aggressive or whether somebody is small and withdrawn. It's the pause and the slow down and the take time. And I think Nara and Tanya were talking about this last time and having the tools to do that. A lot of times relational space tools, and I know the Imago tools, we get told this all the time, but it's slow. And those of us who've done this for a while say, yep, it's so slow. And it's because the connection in relational space happens slowly. So slowing it down is useful. Mirror, what we talked about, what I heard you say is, mirroring is a way to slow things down. That's what people complain about. It's also why it's powerful, in my opinion, or one of the reasons it's powerful. Invite curiosity. What is the need? Often what's coming out in the words is not the message that's most important. So get really curious and invite the group to be curious and invite the individual as much as you can to be curious. I'm going to talk in a minute about how the different ways people present, you want to go about this in different ways, but you want space for people to figure out what is the thing that has me so triggered. If people are expressing really high emotions, it's a safe bet that their cognitive function isn't on track, that they are totally in emotional, what we call the limbic brain space. And you don't want to say that to them because in our culture, we find that insulting. But the goal is not to shut down the emotions. The goal is to re-engage the cognitive, and getting curious about where the needs are, and then the mirroring that slows things down is going to help you do that. And then the other thing to get curious about is, where is the goal this is showing this? Like, there is a good thing in here. Let's get curious about what it is. So for small displays of emotion, this is the withholding kind of space. The first thing I'm going to tell you is if somebody's getting smaller and turtling and protective, they're putting up a shell because that's how they feel safe, you don't want to rip off their shell. And so you want to, what I say is really respect agency. If you're going to do anything to try to draw them out of their shell, the first step is to ask if you can. Would it be okay with you if I mirrored that? Would it be okay with you if I touched your hand? Would it be okay with you if I, whatever it is that you think you can do that's going to help pull them back into the group and make them feel safe and comfortable. If you ask permission, they'll almost always give it to you. If they don't, you really shouldn't do that thing. But even if they give it to you 90% of the time, the fact that you asked, the fact that you gave them the agency increases their safety and the safety of everybody else in the room. Because if one person's sort of withholding, it may be that 3 others are and you just didn't see it. These folks are pretty good at hiding in the way that they withhold. And that other person may be sitting there going, well, I don't want them paying attention to me like that. When you ask, would it be okay if I did this? That protects everybody because they don't feel like they're going to get put on the spot in the same way. They feel like they would have the right to say no. And by the way, when you ask it, you have to mean it. You have to actually mean that it would be okay to say no, and then I'm going to respect it and not do the thing that I would like to do, which is hard as a facilitator because you want to do the thing, but you have to be willing to not do the thing. Empathy is super helpful with small displays of emotions. I'm noticing that you've really pulled back. I imagine you might be feeling, overwhelmed or angry or sad. It doesn't matter if you get it right. You want to just sort of access their emotional space and create space for it. Is that what you're feeling? Check it out. Again, make sure you've checked with them that it's okay to process that in front of the group. Not everybody will, and that's okay. But that's a door in sometimes. Encouragement. If you're willing, I think it'd be really helpful to the group if you would share whatever that thing is. A lot of times we have been taught in our broader culture that expressions of emotion are not okay. So if I'm feeling emotional, the only safe thing I can do is shut up and back off. So a facilitator who really says, your strong emotions are welcome here and useful. And it's not just because we're willing to stop and take care of you. It's because the group needs this. Like you have something to say that's going to make the group better, stronger. That sort of encouragement can be super helpful. And then mirror, which this will be the theme throughout. I think mirroring is an incredibly powerful tool. What I heard you say is, did I get you? Possibly, is there more? When you're in front of a whole group, you have to think about how you're using the time, but that is there more piece very well could fit here. Or you might say, and you want to say this in really respectful ways, I'm going to say that in different words to check that I really understand. Or is it okay with you if I say that in different words to see that I understand? And then did I get you? Like, I know I rephrased it. Is that actually, like, did I get what you're trying to, where you are? And always really that check piece, that did I get you piece is incredibly important, especially if you're mirroring with different words than they used. So that's the sort of when people are withdrawing and getting smaller. Any questions about that?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Let me go back to so I can see you. I was invited to join an existing forming group of a co-housing group to work on their working committee, and they were quite a mob of people that had known each other for some time. They were holding meetings run by a very competent facilitator, but who was a very close friend and respected by them. But I thought the best thing I can do is to contribute what I really thought in the discussion, and it was often at odds with others.
Mm-hmm.
The facilitator was the one that had heightened emotions and got very upset with me not agreeing. And I don't know, listening to you talk, I wonder whether I should, it was very hard for me to have the bravery to speak up and do the same thing, sort of upwards or outwards to the facilitator. What do you recommend?
Yeah, that's really tricky. And it has to do with the fact that I think most of the time when we think of facilitation, we mostly think in terms of managing the cognitive, and we mostly think in terms of what I call directing traffic. And the emotional engagement, the relationship space, the connection building that I think is essential for facilitation is the thing that we're least trained in and least sort of thinking of and expecting. And so I think that happens a lot. I think often facilitators end up being sort of the first person who will raise their hand, somebody who's comfortable in front of a group, willing to do that. I certainly spent a good bit of my life in that role of like, that felt like a really good, powerful position. And I was doing great things for the group. And I'm going to maintain control of this meeting because me controlling the meeting is what's good for the group. Totally out of like the best of intentions, definitely, you know, wanting like the group, what was good for the group, and completely missing the point that what was good for the group was absolutely not for me to take on that role. That the role of the facilitator is to hold the space. And so what I want to say to you with a ton of empathy is, yes, it takes a ton of courage to disrupt that pattern. And I want to just sort of normalize it a little bit. Like, it really doesn't mean that facilitator's a bad guy. Really, really doesn't mean that. And if you can get better facilitation for your meetings, that's going to be hugely helpful. In terms of that particular case, I would look for ways outside of full group meetings to begin to have those conversations. My guess is that if you could sit down one-on-one with a facilitator and really be vulnerable and sort of express your experience of, you know, here I am new and I don't know what all the protocols are, and I have some new and different ideas, and it doesn't feel very safe for me to be sharing those in these meetings. And I'm just kind of, and with a lot of curiosity and a lot of affirmation of their work and that kind of thing to help them feel safe. My guess is that they do not want to shut you down and don't realize how much they are. And so I would say that, and see if you can get the group to get some facilitation training happening for all the facilitators in the group. And if there is only one person routinely facilitating, you want to expand that as well.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Fortunately, the world of co-housing has a lot of pretty excellent facilitators. So there and consultants that help with that. So there are resources for you. Okay.
Thanks, Karen.
I have a question. If in the "did I get you" part, how do you cope with the yes but person, where they say the same thing, you try and rephrase it, try and get them, "Did I get you? Yes, but."
Right. So part of that is, as you adopt the particular structure where there is that "did I get you" and the "is there more," the structure itself will begin to disrupt that pattern because there's a lot of safety in it. I would say when I train groups to be the sender, like the person who's speaking in this structure, when the question is asked, "Did I get you?" what I train them to say is, "What I really want you to hear is." So that also disrupts the yes but pattern because we gave them different words. And we actually want to avoid the no, because we're not trying to judge. We're not trying to mark somebody wrong. This isn't a big red pen, right? This is two people trying to connect with each other. And what I really would like you to hear is actually all that matters. It doesn't matter that they got it wrong and you don't need to draw attention to that. It's what I really want you to hear. And then mostly that will sort through it. The other thing I would say is, I recommend mirroring as much as you possibly can with the exact words they used. And if you have to do it in shorter pieces to do the exact words they used, that's worthwhile. And the yes but people also will get regulated by having shorter sentences. So hold on, let me see if I got that part. What I heard you say is, and then if you can get them exactly the same words, just reverse the pronouns, but exactly their words, "Did I get you?" That is the most reliably powerful. There are a few people who are like, "Well, you just parroted my words back and I wish you'd paraphrase it." For those people, you can paraphrase. But in terms of what's most often, because as soon as you paraphrase, we humans, the odds that you paraphrased and didn't put some of your own agenda in it are tiny. And so if you're using their words, and you want to also think tone and affect and that kind of thing too. You can mirror exactly the same words and change it with a tone with a bad attitude. That is less often a problem. But for those yes but people, Typically, the story I tell myself about somebody who's in the yes but is they don't feel heard because they don't in general in life experience feeling heard. And the more that I can do to really give them the experience of being deeply, deeply heard, the better that's going to be. Does that answer your question? Cool. Okay. I made you all bigger on my screen and now I can't see my slides.
We have 10 more minutes.
Thank you. All right, so I suspect this is the one that you actually came for. I will get it done in 10 minutes. For big displays of emotion, this is the stuff where it's aggressive. The passive aggressive folks are mostly going to be in the previous category, but in the really big displays of emotion. And I broke these out into the 3 different types of big displays because I think they're different. By far the scariest, I think the one that intimidates us the most and is the hardest is the really loud. When somebody stands up and says, this is so not okay with me, and they're screaming and they're swearing and they're stomping and they're what we call aggressive behavior. I'm gonna say probably you can engage with it a little better if you describe it more as passionate, which it probably is. We can decide how to tell ourselves a story about that. What I'm gonna tell you works. It's worked every time I've done it, and I've talked to lots of facilitators who've done more of it than I have. The most reliable way is to mirror, but most people, if they mirror that, come at it as the person in control with this calming, right? Like, it's okay. What I hear you say is, these people hate that. It doesn't work because what it sounds like is I'm in control and you're not. I'm the one who's better here. It comes across as judgment. What works is to mirror all of the affect, if they use swear words, mirror the swear words. If they are screaming, you scream. You get up if they're on their feet, you get on your feet next to them. You want to literally mirror them. You might take it down half a step, but not much. You want to really match them. And if they keep yelling, you keep yelling. Like just, and it's this too, and it's this too, and blah, 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 and blah, 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 blah. You just keep going. And what you will see is almost instantly it will begin to come down. You may need to keep mirroring for 5 minutes or more, but you will very quickly see the energy is dropping, and as their energy drops, your mirror energy drops because you're mirroring them. So keep mirroring as long as they keep going, and when they pause, did I get you? And you may even do a summary at that point. You may, but I'm going to assume if somebody's that big and that loud, it's because they're trying desperately to be heard. And so I recommend practicing this. Mostly I don't love role plays for emotional work because faking the emotions is hard. And so the role play isn't that interesting and that useful. With this one, do role play it. If you are not someone who swears and you want to be able to do this, learn how to mirror swearing. If they feel like you are holding yourself to a different standard than them, it will only fuel the fire. But if you are willing to really meet them in their rage, in their fears, in their fury, whatever that is, they are suddenly not alone in the world, and they go, okay. For people who talk and talk and talk, mirror in bits. Hold on, let me see if I'm getting this so far. What I heard you say is, did I get you? And then they can go on to the next piece if they need to. But disrupting that flow will greatly reduce the repetition that you're getting, and will focus them in. And for those who are lording over that, I am the expert and my way is the only way, you want to mirror with a reframe. And the reframe is, what I'm hearing you say is that in your opinion, or in your experience, or what I'm hearing you say is that your perspective is, and so all of their content is still there, but it's within the frame of this is one viewpoint. And every now and again, you'll get somebody who really pushes back on that and says, you know, that's not my opinion, that's the fact. And as a facilitator, you can say, so your thought is that this is a fact. I'm betting that not everyone in this room agrees with you that that's a fact. And just hold that for the group. And it just disarms. And for most people in collaborative groups, just that it's reframed that way will reset them and disrupt the, what I would call master talk kind of behavior of like, I'm the one who knows everything. Individual needs and group needs. I'm going to be really fast with this because I know we're short on time. Sometimes taking time to care for individual is exactly what the group needs. When high emotions are unexpected, when there is truth to be found, taking group time to work with an individual is going to build relationships, it's going to build safety and trust, and it's going to reveal the stuff that needs to be revealed. Also, when the group has the capacity to help with hurt. If the group simply doesn't have the capacity, dragging people through a process probably won't help. And that's largely intuitive. I don't know if I can tell you exactly how to know that, but just pay attention to those things as you as a facilitator are deciding, are we going to take time to engage with this high emotion at this moment in this group thing? Sometimes the group needs something else. And as a facilitator, it's your job to figure that out, or at least make a best guess and go some direction. If this is a repeat performance, if we're in, this is a pattern over and over and over again, I would be trying to figure out how to address that outside of group meetings. If it seems unlikely to solve anything, I would be looking for ways to address it outside of group meetings. And the other time is if there's very high urgency for a decision. So if whatever the business is that would like to be happening at this meeting really, really needs to happen, and the high emotions are getting in the way of that, that might be a reason to say, there's a lot of emotion here. We do need to work through it. And it's just essential for our mission at this moment to get this other decision made. And we need to kind of push through. You'll pay a price for that in the long run, but if the price for not making the decision is so high, then it might be worth having that, what I would call relational debt, to go back and work through later. So when the group needs something else, lots of strategies you can use. Ask the high emotion person to process it elsewhere, meaning with someone else outside now. Maybe go out of meeting now and talk to someone if there's someone willing to do that. With someone else at another time, with a facilitator at another time. You don't want to just say, hey, can you just put this off? You want to plan for how to do that, but see if we can get that sort of, the caretaking is going to happen, but not right now. You can just flat stop the meeting. And I will say sometimes the very best thing you can do is, wow, nothing good is going to happen if we all stay in this room today. Like, I'm not sure what's going to happen next, but I know it's not this. We're done. And then you can also ask the group to consent to move the decision into a smaller or larger group. So it seems like we're too stuck, we're going to take it to the next circle up, or we're really stuck. Can we just ask the two people within this group that are really stuck to go work it out together with some help, whatever? Or can we just hand this to one person that we all trust? There are lots of ways to do that. Follow up afterwards. Take time in the meeting to process emotions with the group after the individual has settled. So if you have time, like especially when there's been that big aggressive thing, once that person has settled, then you need to check in with everybody else, because there will be a whole group response to that needs some processing time. Check in the next day, do some follow-up with that person once emotions are settling, see how things are going, what follow-up needs might there be. And then make time for feedback toward the facilitator, toward the group, and toward the individuals about the expression of emotion. Do not do this the same meeting, but make time to say, we had this thing that happened. We were all there for it. How'd that go? How did we handle it? What could we do differently next time?